Fall, glorious fall. I don't have much of a voice, but it is fall and the temperatures are just wonderful. And we get to start doing seasonal flower arrangements, which are just some of my very favorites, because there's so many different kinds of things that I guess are pumpkins. I don't know what they were. If Tony, were here, he could tell me exactly what they are. They're probably in the gourd family, but I thought this was just a great looking one. It's kind of a greenish blue. And one thing I must tell you when you go to select your pumpkin, do not pick it up. Tony Milton will fuss at you if you do. This is not a handle, so always carry them like this. Otherwise, the thing might fall off, and then your pumpkin will fall on the floor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hollow this out, and then I'm going to make a flower arrangement in it. And we've done this before, and I just think they're just gloriously seasonal and can make any kind of celebration you're having this time of year fun. I have what I call a keyhole saw. I don't know what the real name for it is, but for me, this is the best thing to use to try to cut into this. It's hard work, I'm going to tell you. And so we'll have step 2 in just a moment. All right, well, I went all the way around and cut this into 7, 8, 9, 10 slices of pie. And now I'm going to hope that it worked. Oh, thank goodness, and it did. Now I can get those out. So let me get that done. And then we will have to do more work cleaning out the inside of the pumpkin so that we can put some oasis in there. And then, finally at last, start our flower arrangement. If you've ever talked to anybody who does flower arranging, they will tell you that the hardest part is the mechanics. And so what we're doing right now is the mechanics. So we'll get back to you in just a few minutes, and I promise it's going to be fun towards the end. Well, I need a nap. That was really hard, but I got this much of it carved out. This is a lot harder than a pumpkin. So if you've got somebody who's real strong, see if they'll help you with it. I don't know if I could have used my Sawzall a little bit, but then I probably would have cut through the whole thing. But anyway, I think this is enough for us to get started, but that's the hard part. So now, I know I poked some holes in this when I was sawing away with that saw. So, remember when you do flower arrangements, everything leaks. And so generally I have some heavy-duty contractor bags, but I left them at home. So in a pinch, we're just going to use some bags that our lunch came in. And I'm going to put 2 of them in here. And I'm not going to trim them until after I finish, because it seems like, you know how your shoe will eat your sock? It seems like if you trim it ahead of time, by the time you finish, it will have fallen down. The next thing is we need something to hold the flowers in place, and this is called Instant Floral Foam, better known as Oasis. That's the trademark name. And I buy it in great big boxes. I buy cartons at a time because it lasts forever. And it's extremely easy to cut to whatever shape you want. As you can see, the trick is that you do soak it. You put it in water and you soak it. It takes maybe 15 minutes, okay? You soak it until you put it in water. You don't push it down. You just have to let it rest in the water, and it will slowly absorb the water. If you push it down, it'll get air bubbles in it. And so I already have a piece, ta-da, that I have pre-soaked and pre-cut for us. And I'm just going to pop that little booger right in there. And now I have something to hold my flowers. I always have too many flowers, but you can't have enough flowers. It's like a full palette of colors. So I got most of the flowers that I'm most excited about on the side of the road coming back from Columbia to St. Matthews. And then today, when I went to the dentist, I found a patch of ageratum. So let's get started. I'm going to start with some roses, and I'll tell you, when you buy roses, don't buy big roses. Only buy tea roses. Tea roses come several to a bunch, and they're much smaller, and they're not gaudy. If I tried to put some big old rose in this, it would just overpower it. So I personally only use tea roses. So I'm going to do some of that, and then we'll come back and we'll add some other flowers. And when I'm doing this, what I do, if I can find my trusty clippers, here they are, is I simply cut the stem, and then I stick it in the oasis, and see, it holds it beautifully. I like to, first of all, you have to pull a lot of the leaves off flowers, strip the stems mostly, because otherwise you're just going to have too much green and you won't be able to see the flowers. I like to cluster flowers because that's the way they grow. You know, you'd have a good many flowers together. And so I try to, rather than put one here and one here and one here, I like to group my flowers. I'm going to go ahead now. I've got found some this really cool stuff called hypericum, and I'm going to put some of it in, and let me show you a little trick. Some of these buds are not open yet. Let's see, here's one here. And although they will open eventually, on some plants you can go in and actually help them along. I guess it's like inducing a baby. So I'm going to peel very, very, very gently some of these sepals that are holding the interior petals or modified petals or whatever we have in this hypericum. I'm going to slowly pull some of these back so that we can get the full effect of what I thought was a really cool flower. And so now we have a lot more color instead of just those tight little buds. So just another trick of the trade. I'm also trying to keep this as if it were going to be used on the dinner table. And so if you put your hand down like this and look across, that's what you would see. So you don't, unless you have somebody you just can't stand to look at, you want to have a pretty good line of vision. So keep that in mind as well. But if you've got people who can't get along, you can set them opposite each other and just fill up the flower pot. How about that? But I thought that hypericum was really fun and a great fall color. I think I've got one more down here in my bucket. No, I guess I do. Yeah, here we go. This one needs a lot more attention, so I'll move on with something else. I found these wonderful yellow, they're called DYAs, which means dang yellow composites, because they're so hard to identify. And they were up there in Sandy Run near the Eastman and Zeus factory. So I found a place to safely park my car, and I got out and trudged along, and I just thought they were perfectly charming. This is the fall is the time for composites, and they're hard to tell apart, so that's why Dr. John says they just call them dang yellow composites a lot of times. But aren't they cheerful flowers? And once again, you'll see that I'm trying to kind of keep things grouped, because that's the way you find them on the roadside. You find them growing in groups. So I'm going to follow Mother Nature to some extent. And you can see this nice oasis. These are small little stems, but they're going in very easily into this oasis. Happy, cheerful little flowers. And then I love pepperberry, and the red color is just dramatic. This is one you have to get from the florist, but it really is lots of fun. And it comes in a white too, but the white I think is kind of boring, so I always like to use the red. And this one, I may break the rule and spread them apart so that that pop of red is distributed throughout the arrangement. Pepperberry. I think it's got, I'm sure everything has a fancy name, a scientific name, but I'm not using that today. If you ever put a flower in and you decide that it's too low, that you want it taller, don't just pull it out and leave it standing in air. You have to put it in a whole new hole, because otherwise there might be an empty airspace if the water starts to get too low. And I think I'm going to make these lower. I think I'm going to change these around some and let them be a lower, because they're so bright you'll see them even if they are a little bit lower. Oasis is the most wonderful invention in the world. When I was a little girl, it wasn't instant, and you had to put it in the sink and put a brick on it and wait until the morning. So but that was a long time ago. So if you go to a hobby shop, they'll call it instant floral foam, not dry floral foam. Ageratum is just a great color, and there's nothing prettier than red and purple. And I found this on my way back from the dentist this morning. It grows on the sides of the roads. There's some varieties that people plant in their gardens, but they're real short, and you want the tall one. So let's start putting in some of this glorious purple ageratum. And as you see, it has a very different texture as well. It's more feathery, so it adds a nice contrast to some of the other things that we have. Be careful when you get out of the car a lot to get things off the roadside. Sometimes you'll end up standing in fire ants, and that is not fun. So please do look carefully about where you're stepping, and don't let that happen to you. Just a nice, wonderful little roadside weed, but not a weed to me. And I found a little liatris also, so we'll put this in. Another spot of that wonderful purplish color that is so lovely in the fall. And then a little more of the DYA that can kind of fall over the edge here, so that we don't have too tight an arrangement. This rose needs to be reset. There we go. Much better. Rabbit tobacco, which Tony and I have admitted we used to when we were little. Sometimes we'd try to make a fake cigarette out of it, and it's perfectly terrible. But it's a beautiful white plant, and it's really going to brighten this up. Silvery. So it really is perfectly lovely. And again, I just had to get out and walk through some weeds to get it. And there it was, all over the roadsides. Perfectly beautiful. Good old rabbit tobacco. A good filler too, as you can see. Get some of those leaves off. Put that down there. Okay. Now, I think we've almost got it. Need a few more little things. I've got a couple of spots. A little more, another composite. And but now we need some things for interest. And I found this. I thought this was pretty cool, but it's too big by itself, so it seems kind of sad sometimes to throw half of a plant away, but sometimes you just have to, even if you paid good money for it at the store. So I think that'll be pretty on the edges. And I had no idea what it was, but it was sitting there, ready for me to pick it up when I was shopping. gonna let that extend over the edge a little bit. There we go. So this is a very tight flower arrangement, but I did it that way so that you could see across it. So we need to do some things so it won't be quite so tight. So I found these. I was just on my way over here, and I found this beautiful grass. And so I'm going to use 3 at a time because I think one will be too flimsy. And so this way we'll have some height. But the nice thing about these grasses is that they're not so thick that you can't see through them. And so we do things a lot of times in 3s. So I'll put 3 clusters of this grass that if Dr. John tells me it's a native, I'm going to go back and get a little bit and try to grow it in my yard, because I just was so charmed when I found it this morning. And I'd like to have some. So see, I've got 3 pieces of that. Now, and see, we can kind of see through that. It's not completely obscuring. And at this point, we can go in and we can trim back the bag. Because remember, everything leaks. You certainly don't want it to leak when you put it on the dining room table, where you've gone to so much trouble and ironed the tablecloth. So I'm just going to cut this back. And I'm going to tuck it in just a little bit. And then I'll look for any last minute things. I've cut some of my husband's mother-in-law tongue, so I probably ought to use a few pieces of it so he won't get mad at me. So let's put, and isn't that a wonderful, wonderful contrast? That big, thick, shiny green leaf. Let's put a little bit of that in. And again, that helps us extend the arrangement kind of over the edge. Although the oasis is damp, we need to add water, and you really must be careful. I try to put my finger down in a little space between the bowl and the where the oasis doesn't quite meet the side. And I very, very slowly add a little water. Just a little bit at a time. Until I've got my finger in there about an inch. I want to add water slowly until the bottom of my finger feels, some of that water. And you should check your plants, especially if you've got the heater on in your house. You should check your arrangements daily and be certain that they stay hydrated. Fall is such a great time to do things. We have Halloween, we have Thanksgiving, we've got cooler weather, so we enjoy different kinds of foods. I hope that this gives you some ideas of decorating, and I'll show you another little trick that I thought would be fun. At home, I have a lot of trivets or stands that I put flowers on, but since this was supposed to be, I hope pretty but more informal, I got a book and I wrapped it up with burlap, and I thought on your table when you're using this, by setting it up a little bit, you can see the beautiful ridges that are in this gourd and appreciate the color a little bit more. It raises it a little bit, and yet you can still hopefully see through it. And I hope that when you gather with the people with whom you feel comfortable and socially distance and perhaps enjoy a meal together anytime throughout this fall season, that this might inspire you to do something to add a little extra joy to people's hearts.